Imagine waking up to find that all your digital communications have suddenly stopped. No internet, no phone calls, no financial transactions. Could underwater cables be the Achilles heel of our modern world? We interviewed General Dominique Trinquand, former head of the French military mission to the United Nations, to learn more about global security threats and technological vulnerabilities in our interconnected world. I'm Philippe, co-founder of the Engage Institute. We offer innovative training solutions for insurance companies worldwide. Do you struggle to capture the knowledge of your experts? Contact us. We'll record engaging interviews with them for you to share. Now, join me as we delve deeper into today's topic together.
Today on the show, I have the great pleasure to welcome General Dominique Trinquand. Hi, Dominique. How are you doing?
Hi. I'm very fine. And you?
I'm looking forward to a discussion here. I think you have a lot of things to say. Dominique, you're a recognized expert in international relations. You're often on TV, on the radio in France to explain about geopolitical challenges we face. You were head of the French military mission to the United Nations in New York, and you advise countries on peacekeeping operations. 2 weeks ago, I think you published a book, D'un monde à l'autre, comprendre les nouveaux enjeux géopolitiques, so from one world to another, understanding the new geopolitical challenges. So I would like to start right away and asking you, are we moving from one world to a new world now?
Yes, certainly that's the case. We don't have to look behind us. We are really in the world which is changing. It has been changing since the start of this century. First with the attack, of course, of the World Trade Center, attacks really on Western country, mainly US, by jihadist, Muslim extremist components. But 2007, really, now we've got also Mr. Putin, who wants to change the world. He wants to change the world with the help of China and other countries, which are all together in the BRICS organization, currently meeting in Kazan, Federation of Russia. And this is really a big change because since the Second World War, we had two great powers, which was US and Russia, and everybody was sitting either on one side or on the other. Now we've got countries who are contesting this world, but we don't know what will be the future world, in fact. So we need to understand, that's why I wrote this book, to understand what are the main problems and what are the main things that are governing our world now in order to create the new world.
And among the main problems, we have one major problem for all of us, actually, global warming. The North Pole is melting. It might open new routes. I think you speak about that in your book, the new routes in the world. We had the hurricanes in Florida. Would people in Florida have to move, find another place, find another country? How will borders be affected?
I think that, of course, we've got the change with climate change. We arrive at a stage where borders are stabilized, roughly. Many borders were drawn by colonialism in Africa mainly.
Yes.
And people were contesting that 20, 30 years ago. Now, nobody is contesting these borders. And we understand that border is a help to discuss between countries. And when you don't have borders, like in the Middle East, between Israel, for example, and Palestine, there is no borders because there is no Palestine. And then we've got war, we've got difficulty. Where we've got borders, but we are no longer contesting these borders, and we are just drawing external borders, which is the Schengen area, which in my book I compare to the borders of the Roman Empire, or what we call the limes. The fact that outside you've got the border, but inside exchanges are facilitated.
So Schengen is nothing new in a way.
No,
it's just
it is
a
not.
repeat.
Exactly. In Europe, it's not new. The borders in Africa, for example, have been changing in the 19th and 20th century. But in the 21st century, no country is contesting the borders. And that's something new. And it's a real capacity to discuss between countries because they know what are their borders.
You said that the global powers are changing, the global power dynamics. What is the most significant shift in global power dynamics right now?
The most important one is related to the different streams, links between the different worlds. Let's speak about commerce, for example. The commerce established and wanted by China during his road is very important because China need Western country to develop his country. The industry in China is working 50% for Western country. That's
Well,
why
the EU is the biggest client.
the other route, which is very important, is the migration, mainly migration in the US coming from South America, and in the Europe coming from Africa. This is very important. Why? Because in Europe mainly, we've got a terrible demographic situation. We are an old continent. And in the South, we've got a very young continent. And so the people are coming in our country. So we need to understand that and control this sort of movements. You've got another stream, which is very important, is the stream of drugs. The drugs mainly for us coming from South America with cocaine, but also from the Middle East. Very important. Why? Mainly because our continent and US are the consumers of drugs. And so we must not blame the people who are producing drugs. We have to blame ourselves.
The consumers.
There is drugs because there are consumers. This is something else. And then we've got the link between communication, mainly the cyber links between different countries, which is increasing enormously. You know that 90% of our numerical exchanges are coming from cables, not from satellites. We've got to be very careful about that. Why? Because all our life is depending about that. And so all this sort of movement are strategic and we must control them. Migration.
How do we control them with, for example, I assume we have submarines preventing other submarines from cutting the cables.
Exactly. Exactly. For example, the French Navy is now involved in creating submarines who are going very deep in order to control these cables and be sure that it's working. But we must understand also that cutting a cable is very easy. But what will you cut? You will cut also your information if you cut that. So people are very cautious about cutting cables because it's not only Western countries are depending that, all the countries are depending on about these exchanges.
So what would happen if one of these cables were cut? We cannot use credit cards anymore. We cannot transfer money anymore. We would pretty much be paralyzed as societies nowadays, no?
Yes, certainly, but we've got two types of exchanges through the cables, and you've got a lot of cables. The more cables you've got, the less you can be cut. Second point is that you've got satellites. Why we are using cables? It's because it's going faster than satellites. But if you've got a myriad of satellites, it's going very fast also. So in fact, we've got this fact that with the cables and satellites, you've got more chances not to be cut.
We would be able to go from, if the cable is cut, we would be able to move like 50% of these transactions or transmissions from cables to satellites. Is it something we could do?
Instead of going, for example, through the Mediterranean, you will go through the Atlantic, the Pacific. It's like internet. Internet was invented to be sure that communication will not be cut. If you're going not from A to B, you will go from A to C to D to B. And this is the way it is going with the cables. I discovered when I was writing this chapter on my book is that France has the largest vessels, the largest numbers of vessels providing cables in the world. It's amazing. We didn't know that. But in fact, 2/3 of the vessels who are putting cables are in the hand of French companies.
Oh, really? So you don't see this as a major threat. The cables would be cut. If you would need to cut all the cables, destroy the satellites to prevent completely internet communications. That's really
Yes,
quite a lot of
exactly.
work.
I was surprised by the fact that we already had attacks on this system and we were very reliable, in fact. We've got problem where, for example, the traffic on the railway was stopped for 6 hours, but not days. And so we need to be patient sometimes, which is not a catastrophe. It is not a complete shamble. And the structure to defend ourselves is more and more efficient.
When you say this would still have an impact, if we have 6 hours or 1 day, 2 days of interruption on the internet, that would have quite a substantial impact on global affairs, right?
Oh, yes, certainly. I'll go back to a military experience. You know, on modern system, defense system, everything is electronic. The tank, for example, the tank nuclear, has 2 computers talking to each other. When you are firing with your gun, you've got 40 different systems degrading from the completely automatic to the handmade way of firing. So we need to continue to learn like that. Meaning that, for example, you've got computerized system for everything. Just have a training on cut it. How I will work with that. And you need to train people to be able to work on degraded system. And that's very important if you don't want to have a complete shamble in the system.
Now you talk about a tank and that you degrade basically that system. I'm thinking a lot of our viewers are from large companies and startups. So as a startup, should I try to see what a day without the internet would look like? Would that be an advice?
Yes, certainly. You need to train your team to cut the system and say, now how do you do? And you put together procedure where you're going from level A to level B to level C to level D in order to be able to maintain the system. It's when we had the COVID, you're surprised that suddenly everybody was able to work from home with the system we are using. We're not used to do that. And suddenly everybody was go home and work from home. And we learn about that. And so after that, we had to put together plans in order to say, if the next day this will happen, then things will be more easier. The first thing was that everybody needs to have a mobile system and not only a text system. This was in the company where I was working, this was the first lesson. How many people have a computer, mobile computer, and have a system with telephone and a backup on that. This is something we need to train and maintain our people. And don't tell me that you've got no time to do that. We've got to do that if we want to sustain our system if there is a problem.
To sustain our systems, we need to have a certain redundancy. Do you think that companies and startups in France or in the European Union are ready for that?
I think after the COVID, that was a good experience. They learned a lot about that. And we need to, the system are improving now currently. So we need to improve also our procedure to use the system. It's very important, certainly.
Now, I'm going to bring a topic that a lot of people said, well, it's not a topic we should talk about. I would say European defense. Is there such thing as a European defense?
You remember that President Macron at one stage said that NATO was in
brain dead.
Brain dead. He was right at that time.
Okay.
But thanks to Mr. Putin, NATO is back. This is a good thing, but this is a bad thing at the same time. Why it's a bad thing? Because 60% of the equipment in Europe are provided by US. NATO is easy because we've got the US. You know, the budget of US defense is probably $850 billion, where in France it's $50 billion. But
Wow.
all European together are probably $350 billion. The problem is that European, we are 27 countries. You can tell us that in US you've got 50 states, but not organized the same way. So my point is that we need to improve our capacity to build a European defense because we've got no choice. In 2 weeks' time, there will be the US election. Will we continuously depend on the votes of 20,000 US citizens in Europe to know that we can be defended by the US or not? Since the war in Ukraine, we have been improving defense in Europe, not enough. We need to continue that, to have European equipment and to build the capacity to work together.
Is that wishful thinking for now?
I think the threat is real. Because the threat is real, people are trying to work together. One point I need to make on the next US election. I'm not a great fan of Mr. Trump, but I wish that he will win because the European then will receive a big shock and they will have to work to build their defense because they will not have to discuss all the time with Mr. Trump, will you play Article 5 or not?
You're being cynical here, Dominique.
I'm cynical. This is a matter of surviving for Europe. We've got, Thucydides, the ancient thinker, was saying, we've got the choice either to lay down or to be free. If we want to be free, we've got to work hard.
Okay. You think we've laid down too long in Europe?
Of course.
Aiming at?
In Europe, we say we've got the 30 years of glorious expansion. And then we've got the 30 years of lazy years. We are spoiled children in Europe.
Wow.
We are not realizing that what we achieve within Europe is fabulous. We have been fighting each other for centuries. And suddenly, no one is talking about a fight between Germany and France, between Belgium and Netherlands. So we need to work to look at that and say, because we are prosperous, we are free, we need to defend that. It's not a gift.
So we cannot relax we cannot relax for the next 30 years anymore?
We don't have to relax. Life is a fight. Life, you need to have a will and to work hard to maintain that. We need to show our children life is not easy. Life is a fight. We achieve that in Europe because we fight for this freedom, for this development, for this democracy. So we need to continue to fight for that.
That's not a very positive message. I was hoping to say now we've reached the rule of law. Every states behave correctly with each other and we have a certain correct way of talking to each other. And you tell me this is gone or what?
I'm very optimistic. I'm just saying that it will be boring to lay down. We need to stand up and to fight. And this is why things is fabulous.
Well, look, I see a lot of advertising now on TV for the army, for recruitment. Is that a bad sign?
No, I think it's a good sign for 2 reasons. First, we need people in the defense system to be ready to have a European defense and to be able to fight by ourselves. Second, I was yesterday with young people who just joined the military academy of Saint-Cyr.
Saint-Cyr is one of the most famous schools in France for the elites to train in the army.
And these young people are fabulous. They are fighting for themselves, but also for their country and for the freedom. And I found that for young people, either they are military or not. I mean, it's not the point of being military. The people who want to do something of their life, not lay down and just wait in front of the TV screen, but want to do something, want to do business, to develop a business, to commit a company, to, all that. These people are fabulous. You need to teach them that, as I say, life is not a novel. You've got really to build something for you and for your children. Lots of European countries don't want to have children. They are working for themselves. They are selfish. But what will be the future if they don't have children?
But it's not only in Europe. We've seen China, Japan, many countries where people say, do we want to bring children in that kind of world?
Wrong. You need to bring children and they will change the world.
They will change the world. Okay. And do you communicate on Instagram or TikTok to give your message, or do you just give it to people like me?
Not TikTok. TikTok, you need to be very careful about TikTok. TikTok is forbidden in China. It's a Chinese thing. It's forbidden in China because they know that it is wrong for the young people to be on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. I'm on X. I'm on Facebook. Yeah. But I'm not really communicating like that. The program are put on X or Instagram or things like that. But I prefer to meet people directly. Your work is to provide this sort of video in order to communicate, but I'm not really able to do that way. I rely on people like you who are doing that.
Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. On the next topic, we've seen the war in Ukraine, which you followed very closely. It seems that they've changed the type of warfare we have now, using drones, like a military startup in a way. What is your point on this?
Yes, many things are changing. Drones, everybody is looking at that. It's very new. Artificial intelligence too is very important in gathering intelligence, for example, and making choices for targets, for example, is of utmost important because you are going faster and faster. Electronic systems also are very important in order of jamming or be able to talk to each other. Very important. The fact that you have also missiles who are going faster, who are more and more precise and able to go through the air defense system is of major importance. Robots are very important. We're talking about demography. If you don't have soldier, or if you want to be able to provide security for your soldier, you will use more and more robots, for example.
And are we going to see the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator in the years to come?
We need to be careful about artificial intelligence, meaning that the man must always be behind the system. The choice must be made by the man, not by the machine. And this is something very difficult. In the European system, for example, we are doing that. I'm not sure that all countries are doing the same thing.
But I don't want to be too provocative, Dominique, but what is an amazing general, but human, is slower at deciding than an AI general? And could this be a disadvantage?
This is very new. We are young in this system. We need to work on this system. At what level I will say, I know it's currently used in Israel, for example. If I target this building, I will kill a very important person, but 100 people will be killed at the same time. Is this choice made by AI or by the commander. That's very important. Some information are saying that IA is already making this choice, and I think it's
really?
bad. At this stage, you need to have the commander deciding that.
In Europe, there is no chance that there is an AI making this call.
I will not say there is no chance. It's really a choice made by the commander saying, I will stop IA at this stage or not. For example, IA will provide me the right information very quick, saying, this is the target, but at the end, I will be the man who will push the button. It's very important.
That must be quite a tough thing as a general, taking these decisions.
I was working with students a few years ago about drones. The drones were very new. And they had a list of criteria. An American told me that when he was in Afghanistan, he saw a car, melting around. And the target list say, yes, you can strike this car. But luckily, there was a patrol on the ground. He asked the patrol to check. And the patrol checked. And the guy was just delivering melon. And that's it.
Wow.
And they say, I was lucky to have this type of rep at the last minute to stop the patrol and ask them to check. Because without that, this guy would have been killed for nothing.
Wow. And then the ethical aspects of this in warfare must be huge.
That's why when going back to the Academy of Saint-Cyr, this is something of major importance. The drill on ethics. The fact that you need, we say in the French army, you need to be on your 2 feet straight. If you don't do that, the soldier will sit or will lie. You need to have the backbone for the soldier, because we say that a man can be an evil or an angel. And very often is both. So you need to drill the angel in order to combat the evil.
How do you do that when you have on the other side people who don't use the same level of ethics? Could ethics put you at a disadvantage?
We need to be sure that we are fighting for the man, for the angel. Because we are fighting like an angel, we can't be evil. When my father was killed in Algeria, he was commanding a company. And a few years ago, there were discussions about torture in Algeria. And the 2 guys were conscript lieutenants under the order of my father. Take contact with my sister and my brother and me and say, with your father, this never happened. And I was very happy to see that 40 years after the war, they were able to come back and to say, we have been educated as people will fight for values. And so because we are fighting for this value, we can't compromise ourselves putting on side this value. Very important.
Luckily, I don't have any experience of such, but it must be tough when you're in the middle of such a hatred environment.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's all about education. Education. And when I was talking about these young cadets trained, very tired, no sleep at night, but at the end, the values are still there. And it's not because you are tired that you say, okay, go and do that. No. So it's at the same time physical training and moral training.
On another topic, I have a mobile phone and I use GPS, but there is a satellite navigation that we have in Europe, Galileo. Can I use my phone and use Galileo instead of GPS?
I don't think that Galileo, the system is completely finished. They need 1 or 2 satellites to finish the system. Yes, you can use that, certainly.
And how do you see Elon Musk and his Starlink? We saw that it was used in Ukraine and it was stopped. It's a private company. They start having more money and more capabilities than most governments in this world. Is war going to be a private business?
No, this is a big problem. Elon Musk, for example, has more means than many states. Yep. And for example, when the war started in Ukraine, He was able to provide Starlink's connection to everyone. And so it was very useful for Ukrainian. But at one stage, he said, you will not use this system to do that.
Mhm.
And this is very dangerous. How can a man alone decide on the fate of a country because you are using a system?
If
And
he's the
this
one
is-
footing the bill, he's the one paying for it.
The US government is paying the bill. He's not doing that for granted. He's doing that because he's earning money. And he's not earning money because someone is paying. So that's why at the end, he was obliged to provide the system without asking a question. But for example, with SpaceX, he was able to do something that no national company was able to do. So this is really a big problem. The general manager of Telegram was arrested in France a few
2 months
weeks
ago.
a month ago. Why? Because he didn't want to provide the information asked by the judiciary in France on drugs trafficking, on human trafficking.
Mhm.
And now he decided to provide this information. This
Okay.
is something very important. In Europe, we are the first one to provide rules, law, which can control this big system. And I think it's very important to control these big systems for the sake of the citizen, to protect the citizen, in fact.
Don't we also need systems where citizens can communicate completely freely? Like imagine that we had some dictators coming to power in Europe. It's not completely impossible. And then they could say, well, if you have the willingness to be free, then we are entitled to check your Telegram account and arrest you. Don't we need something where we have total anonymity?
What do you mean by completely free? Is it completely free to show to children, for example, pornographic things? It is completely free, but we need to educate the people. And so we need to be very careful about what we're showing.
Okay.
When you've got pictures of people killing other people,
Mhm.
anyone can look at that. And you've got people who are looking at that all the time, what damage you are making on their brains. So we need to be careful, completely free. In France, we say that freedom stops when you're going in the freedom of the others.
Yeah,
We need to be very careful about that.
It's a fine line to define, yeah?
Mm.
Back to the AI that you mentioned earlier. Do you think that Europe is falling behind on the AI run?
I think they start late, but they are working on that. And we've got very good engineers, mathematicians in quantum computers who are a bit ahead. So I think that in Europe, we probably start a bit late, but now we are on the right track. I hope that we'll be able. We're putting less money than in the US, for example. Big companies are putting a lot of money, but we've got a different way of looking at things. When I was working in the military, at one stage, I met with the US system, which were working on the computer system for a division. And they were putting a lot of money on that. And they were on the wrong path. So they stopped that, $2 billion, and go to another system. We can't do that. So that's a big difference.
Different scale. About AI, how do we train high-ranking officials? How are you trained on AI? Are you going through AI training programs? And what about your former colleagues from the army? What do you know about AI, actually?
No, in fact, currently we are not trained. I'm no longer in the army, so they are training. People are using AI. But we are warned, be careful about all which is shown and don't take for granted everything that are shown for you. And that's the first step, I mean, to be careful. Then you provide that to specialists that look at that and they come back to you and say, this is right, this is wrong, because they are able in technical terms to look at the different thing. I'm not able to do it. I need to be suspicious, not take everything as granted.
What about European leaders and politicians? Sometimes I have a feeling that they might not be completely aware of the impact of AI or the crypto world, metaverse. How well educated are they on these topics?
As I said, we started late. Why? Because I remember the first time we were talking about AI 2 years ago, we said, okay, it will come, in 10 years' time, we'll have time and all that. And not at all. It's going very, very fast. Now, when you're phoning a company and it's AI which is replying to you, that's the first step. This is quite new. I mean, a few months ago only. So everything will go very fast. And we need to be cautious, know that this is the future, but we must establish rules. I'm not a specialist, but the people who are able to do that need to establish rules. And Europe is the first continent with established rules to organize the use of AI, for example.
Yeah, the EU AI Acts and many other legislation.
Europe is ahead of the others, which is not bad.
In regulation, the US innovates, Europe regulates. Fine. You spoke several times on TV about the independence of Europe, resilience, and sovereignty. So, you know about clouds. When you look at the cloud offerings on the market, most companies now did the switch to the cloud. It's a great solution. But when you look at the cloud, it's mostly over 80% from the US and about 5-6% from China. We have a provider in France, in Switzerland, but it's very minimal. Is this a satisfactory solution to have clouds that are coming from outside the continent?
No, of course, we need to have our European-based system. As I said, we are late on that. People are working on that, and we need to have that. OVH, for example, is
yes,
trying
that's
to
the
have
one I
that.
thought about. It's less than 1% of the market.
Dassault System is working on that.
Okay.
Orange is working on that. We need to improve that. It takes a bit of time, but we've got so many things to do at the same time. But we need to improve. I agree with, of course, China is a problem, but US is a problem too. I mean, all the systems which are in the US, we know that the CIA and all that can go in their system. It's not safe for us. So we need to be careful about that. We need to build that, of course.
A great cloud social media is a perfect source of information.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. Now, we talked about the young generation a bit before. They're globalized, quite individualistic. Do you think they have what it takes for true resilience? We are comfortable. We like to lay down and watch TikTok, or they like to watch TikTok and Instagram.
Why are you able to lay down? Because your parents fought for that. Be careful, because everything needs to be protected. The way you are living, the way you are thinking. In Europe, we are just between the woke system and the totalitarian system. We need to be sure that inside it is organized. And if we defend the way we are living, economic development, intellectual development, freedom, then gradually many countries will look at that and will probably have a system similar to our system. And so this is the role of our young people, to say that what you've got, don't take it as granted. This is something which was acquired because there were wars, because there were fights, we arrived to this level of development.
Do you really think that they're aware of that, Dominique?
I mean, when I'm working young people, university, young leaders, they're aware of that.
But isn't that some kind of a bit elitist crowd?
I'm a believer that ones need to lead something and to lead people. If you are well educated, you've got all the diploma, you've got a good position. It's not only for you, it's for the others. And you've got to do that for the others.
You just speak about history, and I know that in some countries, history books are being rewritten or have been adapted to match the president's narrative. Now, fake news, propaganda, social media, haters, all these things. Are we powerless against these things?
No, we are not powerless. I remember when I was in ex-Yugoslavia, the first thing we say, you need to change the history book. That's the first thing to do.
Back to
In our country, you can learn history through different channels. And then you make your own opinion. Give me an example about France. In France, that's probably the only country where you learn philosophy before your baccalaureate. When I was in UK, they were saying, we are not able to do that because we don't have the teacher to do that. In France, every student for the last year, only 1 year, it is short, but it's enough, is learning philosophy. What is philosophy? Philosophy is the way of asking questions and try to have complex problems solved by thinking and looking at the different way you're looking at one subject. And so I think it is very important. And we've got to do that. And in France, because I'm talking about France, it's a major success to do that. And we need history. I remember talking to foreign students, and they are very good in mathematics or physics, and they have never learned about history. Never.
Wow.
We
That's
need
dangerous.
to learn history, philosophy, and to see where we are and where are we going. In my book, I'm saying at the end that quotation from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the future is only the present organized.
And if you don't know history, you're really ready to repeat it anyway. One thing on social engineering. Now there's a lot of social engineering tactics where you can really approach people, LinkedIn, for example, but other ways where basically you have the whole company, which is laid bare. You know, who's the manager. You even know that from the army, people are on LinkedIn, on websites. Quite easy to find who is where. I'm actually quite surprised about this. Is this normal?
Yes, that's why, because of all these links, you need to be suspicious and to learn who is really behind that. I will give you an example, which was given last week. You know that in Sciences Po, there was people in the street and
Sciences Po is the elite school for political sciences in France.
There was a lot of things about fighting for Palestine and forbidden Jewish students to come to the school. I say very often to the media, don't put your camera in front of 40 people and trying to show that it's all the school which is like that. That's the first thing. Be suspicious about the picture you're looking at. And I was teach last week that inside there was a guy who is a sort of a manager of all this thing. And this guy is in fact an Iranian guy coming from Iran. He was there on purpose to try to organize something. That doesn't mean that you are not supporting Palestine. That means that you can support Palestine, but you need to listen to people who are supporting Israel. We need to talk to each other. And in France, for example, we don't have to fight between French people about a war which is somewhere else. We need to understand each other and try to help to organize peace in this country and not fighting. This is where you need to be suspicious about the picture we're providing to you. The media, I know very well, are here to create the buzz, to create stories. Sometimes it's wrong, sometimes it's true. So be suspicious about the story, but also be suspicious about the people which work is to create the buzz.
But then
Create
in the
something.
end, you cannot, like in the good old world, you cannot trust anybody anymore. And at the end, nothing is true, nothing is wrong. How do you navigate such a complex world where what you see, what you're told, you cannot trust? That's what Trump would say. They're all lying to us.
First, education.
Yeah.
Secondly, on what we say about IA, you need to have people who are able to deconflict the picture, the story, and tell you the truth. Because they can use that. If you are not suspicious, you've got no education, you take for granted everything which is provided to you. Social media, people are looking only at social media. They want to listen. They are not listening to something which is opposite to their position.
Yeah.
The fake news is going faster than a normal news. The people are taking the fake news and turn it very quickly. So you need to be careful about all this system.
That's a huge challenge. Now, we're nearing the end of a nice discussion, Dominique. We've talked a lot about the challenges in the world, warfare, but you've been working a lot on peacekeeping operations. So what kind of advice would you have for the young generation if they want to have a career in this or international organizations? And is it worth going there?
The first thing I will say is that many people are criticizing UN.
Yep.
But UN, it's us. It starts by we people of the United Nations want to ban war. And in New York, it's fabulous because you've got 193 countries meeting every day together and able to speak to each other. And that's very important. Then we've got the problem, it's the decision-making process, which is wrong. With the Security Council, we need to expand and perhaps change the rules about the veto. For the people, working with a UN system means you are working with the world, everybody. But you need not be naive. It's still a world where people are fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
And being part of that, you can change the world, but you can't be naive. First, understand the others. Western people are saying gender issue, LGBT, all that. It's shared by everyone. Wrong. It is not shared by everyone. Yeah. And we need to understand why they don't share that and respect that.
But aren't we, I like what you say, but isn't it a bit gone? That ship has sailed a long while ago. Now there is no discussion on why and trying to understand each other. It's more like, I think yes, it should be. I think no, it shouldn't be. There's no discussion anymore. As you said, we listen to our own preferred channels on social media and done.
That's where we need to go back to education, to philosophy. That's where you need to go back to that and listen to the people. Sometimes I'm meeting people who don't like what I'm saying on TV, and they say, "Oh, you're wrong." I just face them and say, "Explain me, what is wrong?" And I will explain why I say that. Very calm, very quiet. Try to explain that. If he doesn't want to discuss, he will not discuss. If you want to discuss, I remember one day someone was talking with her. I was signing my books and he was against what I was saying. And at the end, he said, "The conversation was interesting. I will buy your book." I say, "Thank you. It's not because you're buying your book, because you're accepting to discuss and to see another point of view." This is very important.
But isn't that more and more rare? I think you have a lot of haters too, probably. With your positions, you must be quite,
Yes, but you need to fight for that. This is why we are currently in Europe, in France, in a peaceful environment. My grandfather was in the resistance. He was sent to Auschwitz concentration camp. He came back from that. And always when I remember that, and I'm talking to my children, I say, at that time, the German did that. Today, it's impossible that they're doing that. Just think about that. The way we have traveled. So we need to continue this travel.
We need to continue this travel. We need to learn philosophy. Now we're coming to the end. I would have just two quick questions. What do you wish now for France, Europe, and maybe the world for the years to come?
To be able to defend themselves European defense, but to realize how lucky we are to be in the world where we are. And because we realize how lucky we are able to defend that, and this will be a model for other countries.
You're an optimist, it sounds to me.
Of course, I'm optimistic.
And now the very last question, just for yourself, what do you truly desire? And I hear your clock ticking, so we're nearly there.
Sorry. So
I like the atmosphere.
I realize that, for example, the war in the East, Putin, the Russian will realize that they are on the wrong path. We need to work together. Russia is part of Europe. We need to work together and to be part of the same world, even if our society are not organized the same way, which is not a problem. We can be organized differently. If we change that, I think we need to realize that within the world, we have to exchange with the people, accept the differences between the people, but remain as we are.
Accept the differences between the people, remain as you are, and study philosophy. That's some of the key takeaways I will keep with me.
Just quoting Georges Bernanos, la plus haute forme de l'espérance est le désespoir surmonté.
Tough to translate.
Difficult to translate.
We'll stay on this French wisdom for now.
Yeah, okay.
Dominique, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing your views with us and taking the time to be here today. All the best. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. That's all for today's episode, where we brought you some of the latest and greatest from the training, technology, and innovation worlds. Thanks for listening, and thanks to our guests for sharing their valuable insight with us. If you struggle to capture the knowledge of your experts, contact us. We'll record engaging interviews with them for you to share. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our channel and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find us on YouTube or LinkedIn, where you can watch the full video of this interview and many others. This interview was made possible thanks to Patrice Séjalon for a powerful remote interview studio based on AI. Until next time, stay safe and stay insured. Cheers.